All right, we are live, and I'm guessing that nobody is complaining about the thumbnail.
What's in the thumbnail? I didn't see it. What is it?
It's her. It's a particular cheesecake shot of her, but it's of course cut at a certain level.
Why? Those are, I mean, dude, those are art shots. They're in every art book in the world.
Yes, exactly.
You would have some nipple phobia or something? Is nipples not allowed?
YouTube does, dude.
They have a no nipple news policy?
Yes, of course they do. Oh, come on. It's the prudy.
The photos like Marilyn Monroe in 1953.
Oh, yeah.
Would they ban the Marilyn Monroe Playboy photos?
Probably.
And they're 60 years old, for Christ's sakes.
It doesn't matter, dude. This is YouTube. Welcome to it.
What is their problem with nipples? I mean,
hey, free the nipple. I'm all for it.
Very, very bizarre, but not as bizarre as the story, which is 10 times more bizarre. Everybody loves a good call girl prostitution ring, right, Eric?
Of course. It's been a while.
I was saving this. I pulled it out of my ass because it links every single thing we've been doing. It's just shocking how many links and dots. There's a lot of people in this story, so you may have to watch this one twice because there's so many people involved in this thing. It's going to cast of thousands, but Heidi Rikan is just a small part of it. There's many, many others involved. To my shock, how many people are linked to this White House call girl ring. We touched on it. The reason we're doing it is because it's part of the Watergate break-in story. It's part of the White House story. It's part of the Washington, D.C. story. There's a lot of tentacles to this call girl ring. The call girl ring was not designed for traveling salesmen who were coming into San Francisco. This was designed for Democrat and Republican politicians and foreign dignitaries as well. But a lot of it was for Democrats who had been in power for a long time. There were Republicans moving into it, but both sides admitted there were far more Democrats simply because it was linked to the DNC and because there were so many people involved in power from the LBJ era still. This was
it like Bobby Baker's blackmail ring, though?
No, we'll get to it. I know people have a lot of questions. I just want to start off, if you start off with John Dean, which we're going to get into with Jeff Shepard. I don't want to go too deep into John Dean because we're going to have a separate episode on John Dean. In fact, we're going to have a separate episode on all of these people. So I'm not going to go deep into John Dean. However, this does involve
keep relaxing here.
Yeah, he's got his feet over like. It's hard to find an old photo. Man, I looked of John Dean where Liddy savaged him because he had really long hair, kind of like Roger Stone. Those photos have been scrubbed. This was a makeover. When they gave him those glasses, he also went to a Beverly Hills, according to the dentist who was Heidi Rikan, one of her lovers. He went to a Beverly Hills plastic surgeon to have hair implants and also have eye work done. And they did a makeover on John Dean when the Watergate hearing started, giving him new outfits and also these owl glasses that he wore, trying to make him look collegiate. He was anything but that. But just to get John Dean out of the way, as to who John Dean was, John Dean went to a military academy. I think he was kicked out of it, but his roommate that he kept as a friend his whole life, you'll be surprised to learn his name, Hunley. He was Barry Goldwater Jr. That was his best friend. And Goldwater Jr. may or may not have been involved in some chicanery. But Dean marries Carla. This is really weird. There was a senator from Missouri. Maybe our followers from Missouri remember this guy, but I never heard of him. His name was Senator Hennings, and he had a daughter named Carla Hennings. And John Dean marries Carla Hennings, and that is his entree into Washington politics. The only reason I mention it, because he will get divorced from her and he will move on to other women. But that's how he gets into D.C., also with Barry Goldwater Jr. and he's a killer. John Dean's a killer. He's not there for political purposes. He's there to take prisoners and to be a power player. He doesn't come in as this naive, bushy liberal kind of guy. He is there with a law degree, and he is going to work his way up the ladder. He ends up being originally in the minority investigative congressional group as an investigator for the Republican Party in Congress, and that was a brief stay over there. And then eventually, as people know, he becomes the counsel to the president in the White House. And he doesn't meet Nixon for 3 years, by the way. He never even meets him. He's working in the White House for 3 years, never even meets Nixon. It takes him 3 years. That's how big he was. But let's get back to Heidi Rikan, because that's all I care about. I'm in love with Heidi Rikan. Can you please show me the picture of her on the boat? Because that's one of my favorite Heidi Rikan bombshell. So I could get motivated. I just want to.
Here you go.
That's my favorite photo.
She's waiting for you. So
yeah, thank you, Lord. Thank you, Jesus, for this photo. Heidi Rikan was German. And there's a certain thing about German women. I'm not going to get into it. But let me see the picture of her family, because we can explain how she got here. There's a picture of her father, who was a commander or a high-ranking official on Nazi submarines. And the upper right is her mother, and the grandmother is on the extreme right. That's Heidi Rikan on the left. And after the war is over, blah, 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 the Germans, the mother was and the grandmother were actually working up in, I think, probably Bremen. They said northern Germany, helping to clean out and design and artillery and tubes in submarines for, different shells to go through them, cleaning them and designing them and everything else. So the father comes back from the war, and the war's over. In 1952, they immigrate to the United States, 1951, 1952. And they end up in Pennsylvania. And I guess there's a lot of Germans in Pennsylvania. It was either there or probably Wisconsin, but they chose Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania Dutch.
Yeah, there's a lot of Germans, and they blend in. And, it's a war family. They try to do things. And Heidi, to her credit, joins the army in 1950, whatever year it was, and becomes a whack. And she's written up in the Reading paper. Now, this is years later. This is a little later. There's a photo of her in an article from the Reading paper as a whack. I don't know if you've got a picture of that. Let me see if I can find a whole article about her, because she's got this really long German name, and they do it's written so salaciously, Eric. It's so sad how they did this stuff. Really, really sad way that they wrote it. But nevertheless, hold on. Let me see if I can find this thing. There's this guy. There's a daughter.
Got it.
You got it. Okay. Yeah. If you could put that up there. Yeah. I've read it before, but pretty whack going back to homeland. She's going over to Germany as a translator, ostensibly, to speak German and go over there. So she's already getting some press. And if you can see her name is this really long German name that involves like 2 or 3 names in one name. She eventually has a couple of pseudonyms and a couple of phony names.
Ido Heidi Charlotte Rikan.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, she shortens that. It's crazy. The name's crazy. She shortens it to Heidi Rikan and Americanizes it, with the spelling Rikan. But she's got like 2 or 3 first names linked together there. It's really crazy. But anyway, so she is going over to Germany to work with the U.S. Army. What's a WAC? Air Force or?
The
WAC?
I don't know.
WAF. WAF is Air Force. WAC.
I think it might be Army. Army Corps. No, it could be Air Corps.
Could be Air Corps. Yeah. Okay. Well, somebody will tell us. But the point of the matter is, she's going back to help
Army.
Army. Yeah. She's going back to help her new found country, which is kind of righteous. You know what I
Now
mean?
they're saying Air Corps. So the
chat look, the plot. Yeah, they're just going to say whatever.
Whatever. We give up on you.
Yeah, we give up on you. Forget about it. It's not part of the story anyway. But anyway, so she goes over there. She does her time, comes back, and she has that little girl. If you show that little girl picture, that's her sister. That's Kathy. She will come into play later on in the story. You're showing her as a baby. Yeah, this is when she comes back. Now, this may or may not be her sister. There's some debate as to whether that's her sister. And we're going to find out a little bit more about that later. So when Heidi comes back, she becomes a stripper, because that's what you do when you get out of the army. And she performs as a stripper at a place called the Blue Mirror. This is 1964, 1966, just so you know where we are time-wise in this story. And a guy who shows up all the time to see her as a stripper there's a photo of her at the Blue Mirror. I think it's on 14th Street in DC, which was at the time kind of a red light district for DC. I'm not completely familiar with DC, but a guy who was familiar, who did go to the Blue Mirror at that time, was a strange guy named Carl Bernstein. And Carl Bernstein used to see, boy, there's so many weird connections to this. It's so bizarre. Not that these connections mean anything. I'm just saying that Carl Bernstein, as a young man, when he was at the Washington Star, used to go to the Blue Mirror, where she was the headliner, and rightfully so. She deserved to be the headliner of that place. But she gets involved with the mob, as things will happen. There's two guys that we should know about who are the guys running the mob in DC. And I don't know these guys, but I do now. I didn't know them growing up. But there's two guys that are important to this story. And one is Charlie the Blade Taurine on the top. That's Charlie the Blade. He's an assassin. He's the muscle for the guy below named Joe Nesline. Now, Joe Nesline is the godfather of DC. He's the Carlos Marcello. He's whatever you want to put, whatever you want to say. He's the guy, the Campisi brothers, Joe Campisi in Dallas. This is his town. On the bottom, what's his name? Nesline becomes the boyfriend, kind of like the owner of Heidi Rikan. And Heidi Rikan is set up in a high-class bordello in DC. High class meaning expensive, really upscale, in the Columbia Plaza apartment complex. The Columbia Plaza apartment complex, which we'll look at this, maybe there's a photo. That's it there, but I wanted to show, it's an upscale building. It's right next to Kitty Corner. Is it Catty Corner or Kitty Corner?
I think it's optional.
Okay. On the left of that thing, if you look on the left end of the picture, going up a little further, is the Columbia Plaza apartment. So it's right, that's the Watergate complex on the right there, that big thing. Across the street, this is an upscale neighborhood, obviously. The Watergate Plaza is kind of new, and the Columbia Plaza situation is also relatively new. And she sets up 3-bedroom apartments in there where guys show up who are have a lot of money, who are political, who are looking for upscale, high-end escorts. Let me just put it that way. Okay. Heidi starts off as one of them. She works her way up to be kind of like the madam. And there's a photo of her with a drink in her hand later on where she's really a madam. There's one photo where they called her the Countess. She's got her hair up. This is her a little later. This is her, I think, in her early to mid 30s. Heidi Rikan was called the Countess at that point. She had pretty well established as a madam in DC. And, she's got this guy protecting her, Joe Nesline, who is kind of her owner. But what happens with Heidi, and you saw some of this in Casino with Sharon Stone, she is asked and does run money to Switzerland for the mob out of DC. She brings suitcases of cash to Switzerland to put in Swiss deposit boxes so they can hide their money. And this was very common in the 60s when the mob found out that they could do this. So they had these girls that they trusted to fly over there and put the money into safety deposit boxes or Swiss bank accounts, she was also doing that too. So this woman, Heidi Rikan, who interestingly enough becomes friends with a chick named Kane. Her name is Maureen Kane. Just to give you all the names here, Maureen Kane is a 21-year-old college student from California. This is her. Probably at that time, she lives in Mar Vista, which is kind of a working class stretch in Culver City. And she goes to school in Beverly Hills. She actually goes to a Catholic school, which is pretty private and upscale in Beverly Hills. Her mother is a showgirl. Whatever you want to look into that, I'm not really sure the extent of her mother's career as a showgirl. But that particular photo of her, she becomes a stewardess. And then she becomes a serial marrier. She marries a guy named Michael Biner. Michael Biner is her high school sweetheart. And Michael Biner is her first husband. She then marries another guy, and that one gets annulled. But we'll get into that a little while because Mo Kane Biner, just give you her full name, how many names she had. Maureen Elizabeth Kane Owen Biner Dean. And by the age of 25, she will be married 3 times. The third one, by the age of 25, the third one will be John Dean of White House fame. This is the wedding. This is during Watergate. He flees to L.A. To marry her, to shut her up. But we'll get to that a little later. Anyway, so Mo is involved with various men, and she comes across a guy named George Owen. Now, George Owen see if I can explain this. He meets up with George Owen. George Owen is a scout for the Dallas Cowboys or a party guy, depending on how you look at it. This is George Owen. He's technically a scout. He will be a scout for the New Orleans Saints. He will be a scout for the Dallas Cowboys. But more importantly, George Owen is one of the Rover Boys. The Rover Boys is a group of party people who work and party with a guy named Clint Murchison. Maybe you might have heard his name. Clint Murchison is obviously a big fish in Dallas, and Grady Clark is another one who's an LBJ crony. These are big LBJ people in Dallas. And George Owen is part of that crew. We used to live with someone named Candy Barr that we talked about in the Jack Ruby episode. She was one of the strippers who was a friend of Jack Ruby's. So you've got George Owen connected to Candy Barr, connected to Jack Ruby, connected to Clint Murchison, and the list goes on and on. So she will eventually get she's now a bigamist. She's married to George Owen, and she's married to Michael Biner. She will get an annulment from this. I don't know who it is.
Clint Murchison.
Well, we're looking for Clint Murchison Jr. So
that is him.
Be specific.
Clint Murchison Jr. Then there you go.
Okay. So Michael Biner will be killed in a brutal car crash in L.A., and she has the marriage to George Owen annulled. So she now has nobody. But the point of the matter is she is now being used by the mob. This is where it gets interesting. She's being used by the mob to get close to football players, Eric. And this is for gambling purposes. And she begins to get close to various football players through this bordello that she's got in DC. So who were the first ones to be targeted? The guys on the Redskins. So all of a sudden, in her book, which we're going to find out, her black book ends up in better hands with the phone numbers. You will find out that various people are in this book. I don't want to give it away yet because a guy shows up named Philip Mackin Bailey. This guy, Philip Bailey, was voted most likely to be disbarred in law school, half jokingly. But this is This is Philip Bailey. He's a liberal in his late 20s. He's a party guy. He's got short hair, but he had long hair at the time. He went to the Catholic University Law School. He is a lieutenant for a guy who will become a big fish named Steny Hoyer, Eric. He will become as his henchman. Steny Hoyer, famous Democrat. Many people know who he is, congressman. But his goal, Philip Bailey's goal, is to be like his hero. And he says this, and his hero is Bobby Baker. He wants to be Bobby Baker. So now we've got this guy setting up, and here he is. That's when he was arrested, but that's with how he looked back then. This is 1968, 1969. So Philip Bailey begins to get involved with Heidi Rikan, and he's a lawyer. So he becomes the lawyer for Heidi Rikan's operation. Now there's cops on the payroll here. There's people being paid off. There's all kinds of different operations going on. The mob, the payoffs, the call girl ring is operating. And there's a guy named Russell. I don't know if you have a picture of this guy. It's a guy named Lou Russell. Now, Lou Russell is kind of like the Jack Lemmon character in JFK. This is Lou Russell. Lou Russell is an ex-FBI agent, a drunken, beaten down man who in the 50s was involved in the House on an American Activities Committee working for the FBI, which he used to be an FBI agent. He's now a lowly, sleazy private dick, also working for Heidi Rikan. Now, what is his job? This guy, Lou Russell, is fascinating because Lou Russell is in the closet, not sexually. He's in the closet filming and recording through a two-way mirror the Johns and the prostitutes who are coming into Heidi Rikan's operation. And that material is valuable to a lot of different people, including John Dean, which is where this thing is going. Philip Bailey discovers that this whole thing is a part of a whole thing, is a honey trap to film these people doing things in their sexual operations with these girls. And he goes into the apartment on his own one day. Philip goes in there and he steals a couple of the audio tapes to listen to them. He's got audio and he's got video, audio and film. He takes the audio and he goes home and listens to it. And he hears these Johns, talking to these prostitutes and saying, I'm this guy. Because one of the systems they had was the prostitute would ask the guy for his driver's license to prove he wasn't a cop, Eric. You know what I mean? So she would take out his driver's license and read it out loud for the audio tape saying, oh, it's Lowell Weicker, Senator of Connecticut from 2223 Virginia Avenue.
And they're stupid enough to go, oh, this is perfectly normal.
Well, that's what they did. I don't know what happened, but look, I wasn't there. So anyway, so he hears all this stuff and he steals like 5 or 6 tapes. And he remembers that, so Philip Bailey's law profession, if there is one, his law business, he's got his sister answering the phone. He's really down on the food chain. He's got an office across from the courthouse. What does he specialize in? Getting hookers out of jail. That's his specialty. Why does he specialize in that? Because he wants to have sex with the hookers, and he's got the lowest law firm in DC, and he's a party guy, but he knows everybody. He knows everybody in Congress. He's got these parties going on. Young people, the aides to the senators are coming, Eric, not the bigwigs, if you know what I mean. The real power brokers are the bigwigs, but the people who run the thing are the aides, Eric, as we're well aware. Mm-hmm. And these are the people showing up to his parties. And he's telling them about the operation so they can also partake in it. So a lot of these people are going through Philip Bailey and ending up in Heidi Rikan's Venus flytrap, if you want to call it that. I guess that's a type of way to get it. So Philip Bailey, interestingly enough, is having an affair, or not an affair, he's having a relationship with one of the boiler room girls from Chappaquiddick, Eric. Remember the boiler room girls from the chat? Well, one of them, and he never named which one it was one of his girlfriends.
Wow.
So what he does at these parties is he gets like college co-eds because Heidi Rikan was specializing in these the Boiler Room girls. Yeah. One of them is Philip Bailey's girlfriend. I don't know which one. And it's not Mary Jo Kopechne, I'll tell you that much, because she's out of the picture. But what he's specializing in is getting young college girls or just out of college to become call girls. People who want to do this type of work, either for excitement or liberation or whatever it is. That's who Heidi Rikan wants working there. She wants young girls who are not professional, not pros. She wants this young group to come in there. And that's what Philip Bailey helps provide for her. And Philip Bailey begins to move up the ladder, and things happen to Philip Bailey. The FBI gets a tip from one of the co-eds that she's not happy doing this, and she rats out Philip Bailey and his operation. Philip Bailey remembers he once got these 2 black pimps out of jail, and the pimp told him that if you ever want to hide something from the police, and I think he did say police, if you ever want to hide something from the popo, he said, wrap it up in tinfoil, write steak on it, and put it in your freezer. And he never forgets this, Bailey. So he takes a couple of the tapes, wraps them up in tinfoil, writes steak on it, and puts it in his freezer and refrigerator. And when he's raided by the FBI, they don't find it because they look in there and they go, oh, steak. What could possibly be
the weight's perfectly fine.
That feels like steak. So anyway, he preserves the tapes, and this is why he's still dangerous to the establishment. And we're going to get back to him in a couple of minutes because I want to get back to Mo. Now, Mo is starting to roll around with Heidi Rikan. This Maureen, this Mo Biner, who will later be Mo Dean, who will later be at the Watergate hearings on TV. Mo Biner begins to become one of Heidi's best friends. In fact, Heidi will be a bridesmaid at the wedding of Mo and John Dean. In Mo Dean, she's in the background and there as a bridesmaid somewhere. There's photos of her in Mo Dean's book. She does not hide this. Mo Dean, Mo Biner at this point, and Heidi Rikan become 2 of the most hottest party girls in DC. They literally take her 1969 convertible Stingray and drive back across the country to LA and party in Beverly Hills, meeting all kinds of celebrities. Here's her car. At first she had, this is Heidi Rikan's car. Heidi Rikan had I think a 1965 XKE Jaguar and sable coats. I mean, she was loaded for bear. This was her original car here, obviously filmed in the desert somewhere. But anyway, so she and Mo Biner become a team. They go to Lake Tahoe together. They go to Vegas together. They meet up with guys, some Arab sheiks. They meet up with all kinds of different people. And she's got a black book, obviously, with names in it, Heidi. And that black book is extremely, I would say, extremely dangerous to the people whose names are in the black book. So she moves in Bethesda, Maryland. She moves in with Heidi Rikan into her condo. And she says that, and she gets a mail there. Her clothes are there. She's living with the madam. She claims she knows nothing about it years later, that Heidi Rikan is like the biggest madam in Washington, D.C. She doesn't know anything about that. She denies being an escort, the whole thing. In fact, they sued everyone after Watergate, the Deans, and they dropped every lawsuit that they ever sued. In other words, they were these people who threatened but never followed through.
That's because discovery is a very dangerous thing.
They never got to discovery. In fact, we'll get into it, but there was Ida Wells, who's, they all had code names. They all had code names in the book. Kind of interesting. Ida Wells was the secretary to Larry O'Brien. the head of the Democratic Party, the head of the DNC. Larry O'Brien's office was ostensibly what we're told in this fairy tale was the target of the Watergate plumbers. Nothing could be further from the truth. Ida Wells was a receptionist out front. She had manned the phone of a guy named Spencer Oliver, who was a young Democratic operative. And that phone and that desk was the way station on how to get hooked up with these escorts. And Ida Wells had the key to that desk. And in that desk, like we said last week or 2 weeks ago, were manila envelopes with 8x10 glossy color photos of the girls you could choose from to be with at the Columbia Plaza apartment, which you could literally walk to from there. This is Alvarez, Josephine Alvarez, who was another one of the girls. She was a stripper, best friend of Heidi Rikan. Alvarez was her running buddy until Alvarez was replaced by Mo Biner as her wing woman. I don't know what you're going to call it when women do it, but Ida Wells sues, the reason I mention this, Ida Wells, after all the dust settles, sues G. Gordon Liddy. Liddy, among others, had claimed what I just said. And Liddy doesn't back down. He gets sued. The jury goes 7-2, becomes a hung jury. They retry the case, and the jury votes 9-0 in favor of Liddy. And Liddy wins the case. She said she was defamed by Liddy. In fact, the jury thought otherwise. And in fact, Ida Wells was the gatekeeper of the call girl ring at that desk in the DNC. Yeah, there's a copy of it. Yeah, there's the Philip Bailey thing. So the Philip Bailey thing is really interesting because Bailey gets arrested and Bailey's got a black book. And they want the black book. And there's a guy named John Rudy. John Rudy is a prosecutor for the Department of Justice. And John Rudy is the guy who's going to handle the case against Philip Bailey. Now, Philip Bailey is the guy who's not even arrested yet, but he's arrested after the FBI with a search warrant. And we were discussing search warrants earlier. He's accused of heading up this Capitol call girl ring. It's the front page of the Washington Star. The Washington Post picks up on it. So they immediately gets a phone call. This John Rudy gets a phone call. And who's on the other end? John Dean. And John Dean says, I'm sending a limo to pick you up. The guy goes, what? He goes, yeah. He sends a White House limo to pick up. He's the attorney for this. Yeah. He sends a White House limo. This is John Dean. He says, I want to see all the evidence that you have, and I want to see the black book. This is what he says on the phone of Philip Bailey. And the guy says, all right, whatever. So Rudy shows up, a limo. John Dean will deny this forever, but John Rudy has gone on the record saying that's exactly what happened. He says, I didn't get limos to pick me up to take me to the White House all the time. He said, I kind of remember this one. But John Rudy goes and meets with John Dean with his assistant, Rudy's assistant prosecutor. And John Dean says, I want to see the black book. And he says, why? He says, I want to see if there's any White House people in there. And the guy goes, all right. And he looks through the book and he says, I'd like to keep this. And the guy goes, you can't keep it, bro. That's evidence. And he says, all right, I'd like to photocopy it. And the guy goes, all right, maybe you can photocopy it. I don't know. Really, this is a violation of Department of Justice protocol. I'm not even going to let you do this, right? So he goes and he studies the names and he's trying to memorize them, to see if there's White House people in there. And there's some people in there. So he's highly concerned because he immediately sees the name John Dean. So he sees his own name in there, and that's got to be hair-raising. He sees Barry Goldwater Jr. He sees Jeb Magruder, who's the head of the committee to reelect the president. He sees Fred LaRue, the lawyer for the assistant of John Mitchell, and he begins to see some other names. Now, this is really in Heidi's book more than in Bailey's book. Bailey's got his own book, but Bailey is brought before a judge. As there's a judge named, I just want you to show a picture of this judge. This judge was a friend, Judge Ricky, I think his name was. This guy, you got to see this guy because this guy's a piece of work. I just wanted to get into this. This is Judge Charles Ricky. Now, Judge Charles Ricky has never been a judge He just got appointed. He's never been a judge, never been involved in anything judicial in his life. He's best friends with a guy named Spiro Agnew, who is part of this crime ring in Maryland. We'll do an episode on Spiro Agnew. But Ricky is his friend. He gets him appointed to the bench. And the prosecution comes in. This guy, John Rudy, comes in, and Philip Bailey comes in. And Philip Bailey is a lawyer. And unlike some people we know, is not representing himself, Eric. There's Agnew. Philip Bailey has a pretty good lawyer, and he comes in with his lawyer, and the judge says, does this case have to go to trial? And because he has been called, Charles Ricky has been called by John Dean. John Dean gets, and you could see in the White House logs all of this information. So this is not, gossip. John Dean calls up a guy to get Ricky on this case because they want this to go away. They don't want this to go to trial. So Ricky says, does this have to go to trial? So Rudy, who's an aggressive prosecutor, says, you bet your ass it does. I've worked for months on this case. And they go, well, what if your defendant's insane? He goes, what? He says, the defendant's not insane, Your Honor. I've known the defendant. I've talked to him. And then the lawyer for the defendant says, Your Honor, my client is clearly not insane, right? And the judge says, well, how do you know he's not insane? He could be crazy. These are crazy things he's doing. And they both, the lawyer and the prosecution, are saying, look, Your Honor, we don't know where this is going, but we'd like to go to trial with this evidence of a violation of the Mann Act. I think like a 22 count indictment against Philip Bailey for aiding and abetting prostitution, for pornographic films. He's got photos up the kazoo. Bailey liked to take photos of the girls for his own personal collection, Eric. He took photos of all these girls. He was a swinger when John Dean was a swinger, when Roger Stone was a swinger. But he's 27 years old, and he's swinging in D.C. And he's taking photos with the girls' permission. This is not like he's smuggling them or doing anything. He's not selling them. It's not a commercial operation. Anyway, so the prosecution says to the judge, and I had to read this because it's so funny, the actual dialogue of the prosecution talking to the judge about the evidence in the case. And he says, behind closed doors, Rudy begins his argument. Witnesses, he says, have told him that Bailey ranged from being weird in his actions to outright paranoia, quote unquote. Quote, now, of course, these weren't expert witnesses. These were male and female persons who were associated with Mr. Bailey going back to 1969. I think this is 1970. But they found in their association with him that his conduct was bizarre at times, that he was very boisterous and radical in his approach to treating different subjects like politics, Eric, social mores, and so forth. Rudy then moves on to a discussion of the evidence seized from Bailey's apartment. Quote, the government's proof will show that Mr. Bailey took photographs of females, Eric, a wide variety of females in the nude, Eric. Some of the females were asked to engage in various acts, such as putting whipped cream on their bodies. This was done at Mr. Bailey's request for the purpose of exciting Mr. Bailey at a later time when he could look at these photographs, Your Honor, giving him a thrill, so to speak, beyond the normal act of sexual intercourse. To make his point, Rudy shows the photos to Judge Ritchie one after another. So the judge is now getting aroused by these photos slowly, one after another. This is Mr. Bailey again, Your Honor, asking the same female to put whipped cream on her body. Those are Mr. Bailey's feet at the bottom, Your Honor. Those are his feet. The female told me it was Mr. Bailey's idea then to eat the whipped cream off her body. Here's another one, whipped cream shot other than the ones I've shown you. This is a different female. In addition, Rudy continues in Bailey's apartment. The FBI also discovered several examples of what he termed commercial pornography, number of motion pictures. One of the films deals with an unknown male and female engaged in oral sodomy and sexual intercourse in living color. Okay, the reason I'm reading this is because the fix is in. The judge and the prosecution, Rudy finally gets the message, want this guy, Philip Bailey, to be sentenced, to be examined at St. Elizabeth's Hospital, the mental institution in Washington, D.C. Now, this has happened all through the 60s. We saw a lot of this with General Walker was brought to a mental institution. This is St. Elizabeth's in Washington, D.C. This guy, this lawyer, who is totally sane, is sent to the complete mental ward, the criminally insane ward within the mental institutions. He's not just sent into the mental institution, which is St. Elizabeth's. By the way, Ezra Pound was put into that place also, the poet Ezra Pound, I think, which is a side story. Anyway, so he is sentenced there to be examined, quote unquote, and he is put into the harshest part of the mental ward, which for the criminally insane, which is something out of Olivia de Havilland in Snake Pit, which I highly recommend to the women out there who want to see a good 40s noir film with Olivia de Havilland. So he is in there for 2 weeks, and he literally cracks and loses his mind. That's how harsh it is. And in 2 weeks, he comes back. They bring him back, and he pleads guilty to 1 count of this thing. And the judge sentences him immediately to 5 years in federal prison. So he has to, oh yeah. He has to be taken off the field to play. And this is orchestrated a lot by John Dean and these people who are in the book because they do not want this. And this sounds very Epstein-like in its regard because he's got names, it's sexual, he's a broker. Now, he's not a guy at the level of an Epstein, but this is Epstein-esque in its regard. They want this guy off the field to play, and they get him off the field to play. Now, this continues on where Heidi Rikan is now still operating and operating even at a bigger level. They don't take down Heidi Rikan. Heidi Rikan has paid off the right people. She knows how to run an operation. But John Dean wants to see if his information is in that desk drawer. Is his name, are the photos of the woman he's in love with, Mo Biner, who will be Mo Dean, are her photos in there? And when the Watergate burglars come in, when Martinez is arrested, when they're all arrested, by the way, Martinez himself, now I just want to get to Martinez for a second. They've got their hands against the wall. And if people remember the story from All the President's Men, when the police come in, one of the cops who comes in is Schaffler. These are undercover DC detectives with guns drawn. And they capture the burglars and they put them up against the wall. And Martinez, this is Schaffler, by the way, who was part of the intelligence unit of the DC police. Now, Schaffler is an interesting character. He will come to the DC police directly from military intelligence. He will come to military intelligence from NSA. And he will end up, by coincidence, sitting in front of the Watergate that night. And he wasn't even scheduled to be working. There's a bunch of different innuendo as to, even he's contradicted himself as to how he ended up there. But Schaffler and his partner, and it's not even his team, Schaffler is with this other team. They are the ones that race in, guns drawn, and they're the ones that apprehend, despite Willis, the black security guard who went across the street to get hamburgers, despite trying to immortalize him in the movie. He came back to his job. He cut out and got hamburgers at Howard Johnson's and cheeseburgers, came back. But Schaffler, which is true, and Willis was new to the job, the black security guard, who gets credit for capturing them. It's really Schaffler who knows who they are, and he puts them up against the wall. Is the point I'm trying to say. And Martinez is moving around trying to reach inside his breast pocket, and Schaffler doesn't know if he's reaching for a gun or whatever. So he says, "Get your hands out of your effing pocket." And Martinez continues after being verbally yelled at by Schaffler to get his hand out of his pocket. He continues to do it. And Schaffler goes over there and beats him down. People don't know this. Beats down the Watergate burglar onto the ground because he thought he might have a gun. And he grabs his hand and he pulls out a black book that Martinez is reaching for, and he's not reaching for the black book. On the back of the black book, a notebook, a tiny little notebook, on the back with directions on what they're going to do that night, by the way. On the back of the notebook is a key taped to the back of the notebook, and he's trying to get that key, Martinez, and swallow the key. And that's why Schaffler roughs him up. He doesn't know that at the time. And he takes the key, and the key opens that desk drawer of Ida Wells with the porno photos in there, third base. And that's what was going on that night, my friends. And that was orders by John Dean to go in, along with Jeb Magruder. Jeb Magruder says to Liddy a couple of weeks before, Liddy's in the, don't forget, we left off episode 9 million, where Liddy is professing Operation Gemstone. Here's Jeb Magruder. Jeb Magruder is a douchebag who is placed in charge of CREEP, the Committee to Re-elect the President. And Jeb Magruder, as we see, has his name in the black book. So he says to Liddy, Liddy's about to go to Miami to begin to operate on his new plan, which is that Magruder saying, yeah, there's old Jeb Magruder. He's in the black book. So Liddy's not happy because Mitchell has scaled down his Operation Gemstone to where it's Operation Charcoal. You know what I mean? And he is embittered that because John Dean had told him and hired him that $1 million was not too much to ask for his counterintelligence operations, his dirty tricks. And his dirty tricks were insane. But Liddy was insane, brilliantly insane, but a madman nonetheless. He presents the plan to Mitchell, speaking in German, calls him Herr General. I mean, it's just all this Nazi stuff that he thinks is funny, Liddy. It can be funny, but Mitchell doesn't find it funny. And he asks him to leave and scale down the plan. So the plan goes to 500,000. It then goes down again to 250. Liddy's not a happy camper at this point. And he's going to go to Miami where the convention, the Democratic and Republican conventions, is John Mitchell. John Mitchell rightfully said, get this guy out of here. You know, Mitchell had moved over from the attorney general's slot to be in charge of the reelection of the president. Gave up his attorney general's seat. Really bizarre, and really leads to the end of Nixon just by that move, which is a crazy move. But anyway, so he tells him to get out, and he's got all these gemstone and sapphire and all these display cards and everything. He's showing the different things, super expensive. So Liddy's about to go to Miami for the convention. He's already got McCord coming, and McCord's going to come with him. You say, well, who's James McCord? James McCord, shown here, is an interesting guy. He just retires, like E. Howard Hunt, from the CIA moments before Watergate. Is that you? Yeah. Moments before Watergate. Both McCord, James McCord, and Hunt have retired. Now, they've retired multiple times. So usually when they retire, it means they're going deep. They're going undercover. James McCord sets up a security company. And it's James McCord Security Associates or some, actually has his name in it. And what is their specialty? Wiretapping, eavesdropping devices, security stuff. And they're hired by the Republican Party to do whatever they're going to do. So McCord has a guy who works for him. And the guy who works for him is a guy named Lou Russell. Lou Russell is his old gappy kind of private detective, former FBI drunk who works for James McCord. Lou Russell is at the Watergate that night. And James McCord, which we're going to do an episode on James McCord, so I really don't want to get deep on James McCord right now. But James McCord has a lot to answer for. He will write the famous John Sirica letter saying after everyone was sentenced that they perjured themselves, it reopens everything. And McCord is there at the break-in. McCord lies about numerous things in the break-in. It's almost like McCord is in on it for the CIA for them to get caught, which is alleged in numerous books, revisionist books that have come out since all the President's Men, because there's so many things that didn't make sense in All the President's Men. In other words, this is the second or third attempt at the break-in when they get caught. And the first one of the Cubans says, I forgot my lock-picking kit. So Liddy says, okay, this is a couple of weeks before. This is not the one where they got caught. He goes, I forgot my lock-picking kit. He goes, where is it? He goes, I left it in Miami. And Liddy goes, okay, fly back to Miami and get your lock-picking kit. We'll regroup after that. So he flies back. Gonzalez flies back to Miami to get his lock-picking kit that he forgot. So when they do the break-in, he still can't open the door. So they take it off the hinges after all this stuff. It's not even a comedy of error. It's kind of like they're intentionally getting caught at this thing because of the CIA operation, where McCord tells them that the tape is still on the door downstairs and it's been removed by Wills. The security guard has already removed it. At 12:45, he says all the lights are out. It's a lie. The lights are still on. There's a number of things that McCord lies during that night that people never figured out why. And the reason is that he was still working for the CIA and this was a trap. Now John Dean, before Operation Gemstone, had come up with Operation Sandwedge. He created this himself. With Jack Caulfield and Tony Lazowitz. And those are the two New York City cops we had mentioned in a previous episode. Caulfield and Lazowitz are sent back to New York, or at least Caulfield is, to get the black book of Xavier Hollander, the happy hooker. This is before they get involved with Heidi Rikan. John Dean sends Jack Caulfield and Tony Lazowitz to New York to see who's in the black book of Xavier Hollander, the famous happy hooker, madam. And he finds a name in that black book of Ron Ziegler, the press secretary to the White House. And he doesn't do anything. He goes to Ziegler and he just taunts him about being in Xavier Hollander's black book. I don't know what this.
This is phone calls with him.
Oh, that's
from the White House. John Dean calling him probably to talk about it.
Yeah. He denies all this, but there's plenty of documentary evidence. Now, still, Heidi is flying to Switzerland. Heidi is partying. She will become very famous for the book, The Happy Hooker. And that sold a lot of books. Anyway, so Mo meets up again with George Owen in New Orleans. He's now the scout for the New Orleans Saints. And what's happening is she's getting close, and the mob wants her to get close to these sports stars. Why? Because they want them to shave points. They want them to do things for the betting line. This is not about sex. It's not about bordellos. It's about big game NFL point shaving and altering football games. Now, this will come out. This is not something that was not noticed by the NFL, because this becomes a huge scandal. And if you look at some of the names in the book, some of these names may seem familiar to sports fans. And you had names like Sonny Jurgensen in there. You had names like Dandy Don Meredith was in there. Oh, here's Sonny Jurgensen. He's in the sex book. And this is what they want to do. They want to have these guys compromised. And a lot of them become compromised by being involved. Here's Donnie Anderson. Paul Hornung will be suspended. If I remember correctly, Paul Hornung, number 5, the runner for the Packers. That's Donnie Anderson. I love Donnie Anderson. Donnie Anderson was a halfback for the Packers. He also punted. Here's the legendary, the Golden Boy, Paul Hornung. He's taken down in this this gambling scandal. This is not an imaginary scandal. This is something that rocked the NFL, people. This was so huge at the time. Just trying to find some of the names here of the people involved in this thing. That is Craig Morton, who was the quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys. Billy Kilmer was part of this thing, the legendary Billy Kilmer. The legendary Lance Rentzel for my Dallas fans. I love Lance Rentzel. This is Billy Kilmer. He's linked to the sex scandal. Paul Hornung. It's such an all-star list. Dandy Don Meredith, Craig Morton, Lance Rentzel, who will later, I think, be kicked out of the NFL for exposing himself to children. I need some of my Dallas fans to remind me. One of the great, I was a wide receiver in high school. I worship Lance Rentzel. I thought he was one of the great receivers of all time. And he was until he exposed himself with his penis. I don't know who he exposed himself to, but he kept doing it, Lance Rentzel. But in this particular scandal, the mob is now in control of these guys because of their sexual predilections. But my favorite one on the list is number 85, Max McGee, because people who know the legend of Max McGee, number 85 for the Packers. This is Super Bowl I against the Chiefs. Super Bowl I, Max McGee, who went to Tulane, who loved to party, was a backup receiver for the Packers, who usually had number 86 and number 84, Boyd Dowler and Carroll Dale were the two wide receivers for the Packers for Bart Starr. And I think it was Boyd Dowler came up lame for that game in the Super Bowl. And Max McGee, who'd been out partying all night, had a level 10 hangover, was called on by Vince Lombardi to play in the Super Bowl. And Max McGee can't even see straight. And he goes into the Super Bowl and he makes 7, if I remember correctly, it's been a while, 7 receptions and 2 touchdown passes received. He receives 2 touchdown passes, makes 2 touchdowns from Bart Starr. One of them, one of the great catches of all time, where he's running on a post pattern. I know this is a little bit off the topic, but he's running on a post pattern and reaches behind him and cutting across the middle, way behind him, to catch a ball with one hand, and then takes it into the end zone in Super Bowl I.
Wow.
One of the great moments in sports history of a guy who wasn't supposed to play, who was completely hungover, blind, goes in to play and becomes the star of Super Bowl I. Max McGee, also in the Black Book of Heidi Rikan. The reason I'm going down this memory lane is simply because of these poor guys who were caught up in this thing. Now, the NFL will claim that this didn't happen, but the internal investigations of the NFL were massive, and it did happen. Now, John Dean will try to get Mo Biner to stay with him. So he gives her a no-show job at the Bureau of Narcotics, where she becomes a secretary at the Bureau of Narcotics. Now, he's not the first guy to ever put a girlfriend on the payroll, but what a weird job to give someone. The third wheel in this troika of girls is Pat Hornung. Pat Hornung gets divorced from Paul Hornung because she realizes that Paul Hornung is going to the madams and going to these bordellos. That's Pat Hornung. She becomes divorced, and this divorcee hooks up with Mo Biner and Heidi Rikan, and the three of them go around the country partying, looking for men, big men. They're big game hunters. They're looking for big game. And at one point, Mo Biner hooks up with Jacques Bergerac, who is a French actor and the heir to the perfume fortune in France, a perfume fortune. She hooks up with a Saudi royal prince. I don't know who that is on the left.
Jack Garfield.
I don't really know who Jack Garfield is, but good photo. Dude, that hair was great. That was worth the photo.
It's like Michael Landon hair.
Yeah. So she begins to, the three of them begin to go around the country doing stuff. So he is still off and on, John Dean, that is, dating Mo Biner. But Rikan is beginning to feel the walls closing in a little bit. But this Watergate thing happens, and Mo Dean shows up and becomes the cause celeb on TV. Everybody's going, who is this woman? In back of Mo Dean, if you look closely, is Heidi Rikan. She's in the Watergate testimony. She's there too, but nobody knows who she is because she's unaccompanied and absolutely stunning. yeah, I don't know if you can see in that picture, but there's Mo Dean. There's Mo Biner, who is now Mo Dean. He marries her like 5 minutes before this. He gets married to her to make sure that she cannot testify against him. And she also is wearing a lot of Heidi Rikan's clothing. Anyway, so the situation gets into Watergate here, and you've got McCord, you've got Magruder involved in this. Now she starts to bring in her own sister, and her sister is Kathy Rikan. I don't know if you have a photo of her. She begins to bring in her 15-year-old sister, and I'm going like, oh, please don't make her into a curl girl, please. But she doesn't. But it turns out that Kathy Rikan, shown here on the left, this is with, what's his name?
Grady Clark.
Grady Clark was a multimillionaire underduke of LBJ. He was a grain dealer, a very wealthy man out of Dallas. He was an LBJ contributor and big Dallas Murchison acolyte. That's Heidi in the middle. On the left is her sister, Kathy Rikan. When Heidi Rikan goes bad, when they take down her operation, this guy he'll marry someone else, but he will kind of adopt her as his daughter and send her to college and stuff. Really interesting. This guy's a good guy. He will take care of her sister, who turns out not to be her sister. It's her daughter. And yes. And this is revealed later on when this guy's wife goes to pick up Heidi Rikan at the airport, and she's sitting at the bar. She becomes an alcoholic, Heidi Rikan. Doesn't end well for her. And she's sitting at the bar in Dallas where she came out to see her daughter who's living with them. And she's drunk, and the guy's wife shows up and taps her on the shoulder, and she says, "Where's my effing daughter?" And she goes, "Your daughter? You mean your sister?" And she's drunk. So she says this a couple of times. Turns out that the father had sex with her, and this is her daughter. So that's why in that photo you showed, if you could go back to that photo with her as a little girl, it kind of looks like a little bit more than the sister where she's in the military uniform. No, this is the photo of the family, but that's the guy who did that. There was a photo of her with the little girl in a military. You showed it before, the military
I'm
outfit.
getting there.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know what's going on. Yeah, that is her daughter, or allegedly. I'm not sure. I mean, Heidi Rikan will move in with her mother in Pennsylvania and eventually fall down a flight of stairs in the house and die. Now, the reason we have all this information is because of that little girl. That little girl will grow up to be Kathy Rikan, and she will eventually go to the basement of her mother's house in Pennsylvania outside of Reading and go through her belongings and find the black book that we've been discussing. That black book was found and copied by Kathy Rikan and given to authors as proof as to these people being involved. Now, if you look in her black book on one page, and this is Rikan's black book, you'll see the names of two Watergate celebrity people. I don't know if you have that, if you put that up there before, but there are
multiple pages. So.
Not this page. No, you see Billy Kilmer there, interestingly enough. There's Billy Kilmer, the quarterback. Not this one. No, there's another one.
John
Keep
Dean.
Going. Keep going.
Sam
What does
Dash.
that say? What does that say?
Sam Dash and Lowell Ricker.
No, Lowell Weicker, my friend, the great senator. Just go back to that for a second. Lowell Weicker on the Watergate committee was one of the biggest Whigs to convict Nixon. And Sam Dash, of course, another one who helped to try to convict Nixon. Those two names were in Heidi's black book. This was years afterwards. And Sam Dash, those are his personal numbers. Lowell Weicker from Connecticut. I partied with Lowell Weicker. I went to this is really bizarre. My friend Cleveland Stores, who I went to Bard with, used to live, came from a lot of money, and his family lived on the North Shore, had a house at North Shore, Long Island, and next door was Lowell Weicker, had a mansion there too. So we went next door to Lowell Weicker. I guess his daughter went to college with us. That's what it was. His daughter went to Bard. His daughter became a lesbian, went to Bard. It's all coming back now. So there was a party at Lowell Weicker's, the senator from Connecticut, and we went next door and we partied all night with Lowell Weicker, and we slept over there. And at one point I went down to the kitchen where they had like an industrial kitchen, huge kitchen. And I was looking through the refrigerator, and there in his boxer shorts, bending over, drunk, trying to find a beer, is the great senator from the state of Connecticut, Lowell Weicker. And I said, and he's yelling, "What do you got to do to get a beer in this house?" I said, "I don't know. It's your house, Senator. I'm just passing through." And that was my encounter with this guy, Lowell Weicker. So I've now encountered Ted Kennedy in his underwear, hungover, and Lowell Weicker in his underwear, looking for a beer in a refrigerator.
So you like senators in their underwear?
I don't like them. I'm just telling you what happened to me. It's not a question of liking or not liking. The Cleveland brought us in there to Sagamore Hill, I think is what it is, on the North Shore of Long Island. Roosevelt had a house up there. And then this friend of mine had it, and then this Lowell Weicker house next door. Anyway, so Weicker ends up in this black book with Sam Dash in the black book. So you can imagine how much Woodward and Bernstein wanted to suppress this for their own narrative, Eric, and how everybody in the DNC and the RNC, for that matter, wanted to suppress this. Most of the people in there are Democrats, simply because they'd been in power longer and more recently. But they had just come to power, the Republicans, so their names were starting to get into the book also. So there's a lot of interesting people involved in this thing. Bailey is never the same, by the way. Even though he does recover, he gets like PTSD. Philip Bailey, from his experience in the mental hospital, he does a year out of the 5 and then disappears to Florida, where he was still alive, like 2013, 2014. He was still alive down there. But when Dean marries Mo, she can no longer testify against him. But one of the first memos that John Dean writes to these people, Ulasewicz and Caulfield and Liddy, is he wants to put a list together of political enemies. And that is the origin of the enemies list for people who didn't know that.
Wow.
All of this comes from John Dean. And a lot of it is he wants political power like Hoover did through sexual information. That's what he's digging for, because he's a sick fuck himself. He's involved in all of this stuff. And who is running around now with this information? The reason Nesleen is doing this is that he is working for a guy who's trying to get and negotiate through John Dean. Nesleen is trying to work and negotiate a presidential pardon for an obscure guy named Jimmy Hoffa. Nesleen will provide and be the guy who shuffles $1.5 million in money to the Nixon reelection fund to get the pardon from Jimmy Hoffa. This is negotiated by John Dean and through Nesleen, the crime boss of D.C. Just so you people know, Nixon's not innocent either regarding the mob and use of money. That pardon by Hoffa is part of a payoff to get Hoffa by Nesleen on the bottom there. Not that Nesleen came up with this, but through Hoffa's people, Nesleen was able to use sexual blackmail to get them to accept the money to get Hoffa out of jail. It was a lot of money. And Nixon took that money. He also took money from Mickey Cohen out in L.A., about $500,000 from Mickey Cohen also. So his hands are not clean.
Wow.
I hope that helps somebody understand where we're going with this thing, because there's so many tentacles to Watergate that I thought it could keep us busy for a while, like the JFK stuff did, because the tentacles run so far. There's so many things involved, and we're going to go into a deep dive on all of these cats, like Magruder, Liddy. We've done. Liddy is the only one who doesn't know what's going on here. He thinks when Jeb Magruder says to him, I didn't explain this properly. When Liddy was going to go to Miami, Jeb Magruder says, "Can you break into the Watergate?" And he goes, "Well, I'm going to Miami." And he says, this is sudden to Liddy. And Liddy goes, what's in the Watergate? I don't get it. He goes, we just need some information, from Larry O'Brien's office. And Liddy, in his book, in his own words, says, there's nothing in there, bro. They've already moved their operation to Miami. In other words, anything of value, and Liddy's correct, anything of value in that office has already been moved because they've ostensibly moved their operation for the Democratic convention, Eric, to Miami. So Liddy says, what is it you want in there? I don't get it. And Magruder just says, we want you to do this. Just do it. And they get rough with him. And Liddy goes, all right. Liddy's not going to argue with him. And he realizes it's not Magruder's idea. Magruder's just telling him that this is what we want to do. And that's where it starts for Liddy. Liddy was about to leave from Miami, and he's going, I don't even know what you want in this stupid operation in the DNC headquarters. There's nothing in there. And in fact, Liddy was not privy to what we just described today about this sex ring and the information that they wanted out of there. Personally, Magruder and John Dean. Jeb Magruder and John Dean's names were in those books. That's why they wanted that stuff while they were out of town in Miami. That's why they wanted to go in immediately. Wow. This thing literally happens in the same month that Magruder talks to Liddy. And Liddy's going like, what's the rush? I don't get it. And he's just going, just do it. We just want to get it done. And that's what Liddy is told. And that's because Dean and Magruder conspired to get this done.
Couple of rats. And then, of course, Dean rolled on everybody.
And so did Magruder. And so did, we're going to get into some of the other people that rolled. You know what I mean?
But you got to love it. The guys who want this done are the ones who then roll on everybody involved. Everybody gets locked up.
Well, they clearly know more than anybody else. That's why they have the ability to roll. And when we have Jeff Shepard back, we're going to go over John Dean's various testimonies that he came up with, the contradictions of John Dean's stuff, because John Dean will be stymied by Watergate prosecutors because they want him to finger the president. And like Michael Cohen, he is the lawyer to the president. And like Michael Cohen, they will squeeze him to finger Trump. They will squeeze John Dean to finger Richard Nixon, who has nothing to do with this.
Amazing.
Yeah, it is amazing. It is really, and this is fairly well documented. There's multiple books that I've cross-referenced to get this information. But I love the connection there. Philip Bailey dating one of the Boiler Room Chappaquiddick girls. I love that.
Yeah, I think I'll probably I need to put a link to this book in the description, though, because a lot of this came from here.
Yeah, but this is a Roger Stone type book that really goes back to Jim Houghton's book, Secret Agenda. I mean, that book, Silent Coup, is just a Cliff Notes book. Yeah, it's just a short little Cliff Notes like Roger Stone does. The real book is Secret Agenda, the real money book, and Silent Coup. There's a couple of them. It's not just one book. There's some multiple books going on. But anyway, yeah, put some links up. That's fine.
Definitely.
Yeah, people probably think I make half this shit up anyway. So
okay.
No, I'm saying I know this way they can see it.
But why argue?
Oh, he didn't make it up. He actually using some books. This guy.
But they've got they have their feelings.
Yeah, I don't want to hurt their feelings.
All right. Well, I think that's enough for everybody to digest for
enough?
a while.
I mean, yeah.
I think so. Ms.
You might have to look at this again, but I love the Rover Boys. I love the Rover Boys that George Owen was part of and Murkison, because it ties into LBJ. You know, I'm sorry, I missed that. You might want to go back.
I'll pull it back up when you're done.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm just the Schaffler is interesting. The Schaffler DC guy who comes from military intelligence. Schaffler, just so people know, that photo you told of Schaffler, he's the guy that calls the desk at the Washington Post after the arrest. He immediately calls the Washington Post, and they immediately call in Woodward and Bernstein to write the first story the next morning about the burglars. That's why he goes to the court in the movie and in the book and in real life. Woodward goes to the court and he hears James McCord, inexplicably out loud in open court say he's employed by the was employed by the Central Intelligence Agency. And that's what starts the ball rolling. I mean, obviously Woodward is in on it. I think Bernstein's not in on it. I think Bernstein is just a mad dog reporter who smells blood and a great story because he kind of piggybacks onto Woodward and they become a team. But Schaffler is the guy that calls the police reporter of the Washington Post to give him the arrest story that night. Why? Why would he do that? What's it to Schaffler?
That is weird.
Mm-hmm.
What was the other book you said? Silent Coup, and what was the other?
Secret Agenda by Jim Houghton.
Secret Agenda. Okay.
Jim Hogan.
There we go. All right. I put links in here so people can always grab them on.
I just want to say that I partied with Lowell Weicker. I didn't remember that till last night. That whole story about Cleveland Stores' house and Lowell Weicker in his underwear. My second United States senator, one a Democrat, one a Republican, but Weicker was a liberal Republican. He was an anti-Nixon guy.
Okay, well, there you go. Another claim to fame from Mark.
Yeah. I completely forgot that story.
All right, well, let's see. Ms. Awesome had to say, I read this book based on Mark's recommendation and found it very titillating.
Woo!
Thanks for doing an episode on it. I'm not sure which one. It might have been the one that I showed.
Yeah, it might be the Call Girl one. It's pretty recent, but I mean, it's like 2013, I want to say.
Yeah, one of them was 2016.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you why. Because the documents were sealed for 40 years, and that's what Jeff Shepard hipped us to. And these documents, the whole reason we're doing this series is because of the release of these documents that were sealed for 40, 50 years.
Okay.
Yeah, and Shepard is really the guy at the cutting edge of getting these docs out now for the first time. Testimony in the grand jury, things of that nature.
Let's see. PD said, I will confess anything to Heidi.
Yeah, let me tell you something. That she ran an upscale operation. Let me put it that way. This was not a street level operation.
Mark's like, is it still available?
Let me tell you. Well, Philip Bailey, I really like this guy, Philip Bailey. I mean, he is an interesting character with a law degree, you know.
Well, formerly,
they're most likely to be disbarred, but
yeah, he's the Avenatti of no.
Yeah.
Mark, save Trump from the New York City trial and crowd reaction.
Save Trump. I don't know what that means. I wish I could. I mean, I don't know. You sent me that thing, but I don't know. What was De Niro doing there?
Mouthing off.
No, but it was a press conference for Biden. There was an official thing. He just didn't show up. There was actually some sort of presser.
I don't know, but
what does he have to do with any of this?
Well, he's always going around spouting off at Trump, so I guess
at events having nothing to do with it. He literally went to the courthouse for a press conference, Eric, about something.
Well, I think about Trump, to yell about Trump.
Right, but what does that mean? I don't even know. What does that mean?
I mean, well,
we'll discuss it on Friday. We'll talk about it on Friday.
And Mo Bishop said, we need an AUS shirt that says, don't be a patsy.
Don't be a patsy. That's a good one.
Oh, Becca Lee said, fascinating. I'm sharing this with my football friends.
Yeah, good luck on that one, NFL. There's a lot. It's so funny. It's so many stars are involved in this. And so many Packers. It bothers me as a Packer fan. I mean, I love Donnie Anderson, and people who know Max McGee who are Packer fans. I mean, you got to have a place in your heart for Max McGee. But yeah, Donnie Anderson was a acolyte of Paul Hornung. He replaced Paul Hornung.
Yeah, I don't follow all that. So
not that you have to. I mean, Paul Hornung was a legend. He was a living legend as a Packer running back and kicker. But Paul Hornung was the golden boy. I mean, he was God and a legend. And then, some of these other people, not as big. But Dandy Don Meredith. I mean, turn out the
Ed
lights.
Horney's kind of a legend though herself. Sorry.
But Don Meredith, I mean, turn out the lights, the party's over. I mean, he was the announcer for Monday Night Football for, 30 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I mean, that's the voice you heard. I think Craig Morton might have replaced, I'm not sure who replaced Don Meredith. It might have been Craig. I don't know 100% about Dallas, but Lance Rensel, I definitely know. That's interesting.
Well, I'll tell you what, there's so much here that we had to cover, and there were so many pictures and everything put together that I had to get up this morning and had to make sure that I was drinking some of America's Untold Story Supreme Breakfast Blend.
Wow.
And you can too by using the link in the description wherever you might be watching this at americasuntoldstories.com/coffee. And it is fantastic coffee. It will help you get off your ass, like I got off my ass, to get pictures and content for this show, because there was a lot of pictures to go through and clean up and track down and everything else. So I hope you guys consider getting that. And as Mad Scientist says, coffee is for closers.
Is that true?
Baldwin agrees and says that you need to get your coffee there. americasuntoldstories.com/coffee.
And they get it in the mail?
They get it in the mail, and they can even subscribe to it. If you try it out. If you like it, you can subscribe. Then you don't have to think about it. It'll just come, every whatever your drinking schedule is. I don't know, a bag a month, a bag a week. I don't know.
A lot of bags in this show. I'll tell you that much. All kinds of bags. They were bad. Dude, he comes out. At one point, Philip Bailey comes out of the Columbia Plaza Apartments, and he sees a copy nose up on the telephone pole, and he realizes he's putting in a wiretap, and he goes, "What are you guys doing here?" And he goes, "What are you doing here?" And he knows this. It was kind of funny, but the interesting thing about my relationship with the Dallas Cowboys is my relationship. When I played football for high school, we had before me, we had an all-pro lineman, offensive guard named John Nyland. And Nyland went on to become all-pro for the Dallas Cowboys for many years, one of the great offensive guards. I think he played right guard. I'm not sure. But he would come back to our high school every summer when we were training in August for football in Amityville and give us a pep talk and blah, blah, blah. So I always was amazed that this guy who was so big, John Nyland, who was a god for the Cowboys in 1968, would come back to my high school to give us a football pep talk, but he had gone to school and had been on the same team. And I always was amazed. It made a big impression on me at the time. It stuck with me for a long time, John Nyland. For people who are Cowboy fans, I'm not a Cowboy fan. I'm a Packer fan. But
I am not a Cowboy fan. As a matter of fact, that is my favorite team.
Oh, okay.
Whoever is playing the Cowboys.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Right. Well, sometimes the Packers play them. And whether it was the frozen
then they're in this cycle there.
Yeah.
Occasionally they're my favorite team.
Field, they would play in the frozen tundra. But anyway, so the Dallas fans, you've got Lance Rensel to worry about, and Craig Morton, who was apparently involved in this thing, and Dallas's god, Dandy Don Meredith. But they had Bob Hayes. The Cowboys also had Bob Hayes, one of the fastest humans on the earth.
Okay, and Mac Wallace suggested, Mac Wallace Arbitration Service, that we can put the coffee in foil in the freezer and market steak.
You'll never find it. It'll stay in there.
All right, and BTK.
Maybe Lowell Weicker was looking for something in that freezer that morning.
Maybe. BTK said, you said for Trump not to show up, DC cop's a loser.
Oh, yeah. Well, he obviously showed up. I mean, if he's found guilty, will he be able to leave is my question.
You know what?
Barnes seems to think this is all just going to go away. I don't see how it goes away.
I hope it hangs. I hope that there's one juror that hangs it.
Good luck.
I know, but
good luck with that juror. You think the pressure on that juror might be enormous?
Well, what would be more pressure for the juror? What do you think Marshawn would do if a juror's hanging? He's going to get in there till the end of the time to finish.
Not only that, he'll threaten them with the release of his name and address and everything else. They'll kill the guy.
All right, Al Gonzalez speaking up here. Speaking of NFL horn dogs, how about when the Inquirer recorded Frank Gifford wanting backdoor from the stewardess in the hotel room?
Dude, thank you. I completely forgot about that. But this thing, is a little bit bigger than the Frank Gifford thing. Frank Gifford paid.
Well, Kathy would disagree. No.
Yeah, Kathy. Well, ask Pat Horning, his wife, if she disagreed. But holy crap, there was a lot of the NFL had a problem on their hands back then.
Wow. Yeah, they did. Well, you know what? We're going to continue this discussion over on Locals. Everybody, you can join our Locals as a member for free on structure.locals.com. And we always have a little bit of an after party where we answer some tips there and other questions, hang out and talk about other random subjects.
Such as Dan Moldea. We'll mention Dan Moldea when we go. Remind me.
Dan Moldea. And for those of you who don't want to bother, who say, to hell with Locals, to hell with the cool people, then we'll just see you Friday on Freeform Friday, and have a fantastic day either way.
These people are dead to me. Let's go over to the good people.
Let's go over.